Welcome back. This is Edward Reed's Buddhist Books Readings, Pāli Scriptures, Part 7. Episode 7? I don't know. If this is your first time seeing me, click here instead. That's the whole Buddhist Books playlist. Start with Episode 1 of Dhammapada. Just start at the beginning of the playlist. And then you can just sit and watch for I don't know how many hours at this point. Let's do some quick math. Approximately 6.5, 7 hours, because these more often go over 30 minutes, not so much under 30 minutes. How are you guys? I'm feeling kind of emotionally raw and vulnerable for some reason, but I did my sun salutations, trying to add one every day. I'm up to 9. They seem to get quicker the more I add. This episode brought to you by, available all around the world, except for Russia and China, you need a VPN. Anyway. Okay. So we've got our rose quartz wand, in case I feel like using it. And let's jump right in for a change, shall we? Real quick, as promised, I listened to me and I looked up and I've got like a new element here where I've got a hidden screen. So if I feel like putting things here. So Buddhaghosa was a 5th century Indian Theravāda Buddhist commentator. Now we know. 5th century, so that was a long time ago. That means 400s. Sometimes people say 5th century and they mean 500s. No. The 1st century started with 0 and ended with 100, basically. And then the 2nd century started with 101, ended with 200. So you would not be wrong to say 2nd century if it was on December 31st of 200. But you would be wrong if it was on January 1st of 201. That's how that works. Anyway, as far as I know, comment below if I screwed that up. So he was a 5th century Indian Theravadist commentator, translator, and philosopher. He worked in the great monastery, or Mahavir, at Anuradhapura, Sri Lanka, and saw himself as being part of the Vigabhajavada school in the lineage of the Sinhalese Mahavir. There's another Mahavir who was, I believe that was the name of the man who started Jainism. So a little confusing when it comes to, Indian names. There's a lot of, Maha means great, Vir means something. I should know this, but I don't. I'm learning slowly. I've got to work in that 30 minutes of Rosetta Stone Hindi back into my routine. So yeah, there's more than one. There's like a Chandragupta who took over India, not to be confused with a different Chandragupta who took over India 150 some odd years later, or 80, or whenever it was. This was a long time ago. History is much longer and bigger and wider in India than what my folks back in Los Angeles are used to, where it's like way back when the Spanish were here, they built a church over yonder, and they called it Nuestra Senora Regina de Los Angeles. And then 100 years later, a guy named King Carlos said, hey, that's a good name for a city. And then they built it, and here we are, the end. That's the story. And the oldest houses are like 100 years old. So yeah, India's very different. People are like, oh yeah, that just happened like 800 years ago, or like, oh, that was only 1,100 years ago? Oh, okay, I thought this was old, that kind of thing. Let's jump right in, shall we? For a change. Okay, see, I've got this little thing so I know where I am now. We're like upgrading our... Oh, also, I wanted to find out once and for all, is it Mahākāssapa or Mahākāsyapa? So, let's hear from someone who maybe knows what he's talking about.
Mahākāsyapa.
Mahākāsyapa. I got to try to remember to silence the A's at the ends of words in Sanskrit. Because they're silent. Why are they there? Don't know. But I mean, there's weirder things that go on in English, right? All right. No need to start listing those off, because that's not what this is about. There's a History of English podcast. I don't know if they're on YouTube, but if they are, If you saw nothing, that means they're not on YouTube. Okay. Oh, also, I wrote to... okay, so I mentioned in the previous episode that there was an old Japanese guy who was a Zen master, Zen teacher, Zen patriarch, in fact, who was a yoga teacher as well. And his name is Osho, so that's confusing, right? Try looking up Osho Zen Yoga and see if you can find anyone except for, Rajneesh Osho. And I've already forgotten the rest of his name, but I'll go ahead and point to his channel. It's right there if you want to check it out. There's some interviews with him and a woman from somewhere. She asks fun questions like about, is Jesus real? And then he does his best to answer her questions. So that's fun, but you get to kind of see his personality and his face and voice. I think I only went to 3 of his classes, but he had an impact. He was the one who I showed a picture of these kakejiku, and he said, you went to all those temples? And I said, well, no, these were a gift. They were given to me by a friend, and her parents went to the pilgrimage. He says, that's cheating. That's, you have to go on the pilgrimage. You can't just hang the banners and say, oh, someone else went on the pilgrimage. And I was like, okay. So I'm a fraud, basically. So I did 1 or 2 things, but I didn't go on these pilgrimages. I didn't earn this, and I bought everything else. Yeah, total fraud. Okay, here we go. The schools of Banakas also had their own views about the history of early Buddhism. E.g., the Digha Banakas said that the Bodhisattva saw all 4 nimittas on the same day. I'll be interested to find out how Bodhisattva and Bodhisattva, if they're the same thing, A and B, how the Bodhisattva concept fits into Theravāda. Because in my ignorance right now, the Bodhisattva concept was introduced in Mahayana. But I think I'm wrong about that. So let's find out. Maybe you're wrong too, right? So I'm making this, as an ignoramus, I'm making this for people who are more ignorant than myself, so that we can learn together, or people who are less ignorant than myself to feel superior and laugh at me. Either one, I consider that a success. Okay. Saw all 4 nimittas on the same day. Footnote. Blah, blah, blah. We're going to ignore these footnotes because they're like jaw 1 5920. It's like, refers to the bibliography, and this is from another book, and we've got to buy. That's what my dad calls the head stuck ones goose chasing footnotes. It's like, okay, we got to get that book now. It's easier if you're in a giant library in Alexandria or something. You can just spend all day wandering around by getting books out of the shelf. Or if you can find most of these texts on the Gutenberg press, but I'm a weirdo. I like to have the book in my hand, when it's important. I feel like the Buddhist bookshelf I'm going to be using for my whole life, I would imagine, right? And I'd like to be able to read it even when the electricity's out. With a candle, why not? Who reads by candle? Oh, well, there's the sun, right? Yeah, that helps. Okay, where were we? Yes. While the other Banas had other views. The Majjhima Banakas gave a different reason. Did we already read this? No. They gave a different reason from the Digha Banakas for Ananda's late arrival at the council. Ananda was late to the council. Well, in Suryangama Volume 8, there was something about Patanji's daughter and Ananda. I bet that's why he was late to the council. Well, anyway. But that was written hundreds and hundreds of years later, so I doubt that it has any insight into these sorts of things. Okay, to judge from the way that Buddhaghosa, we know vaguely who he is now, 5th century Theravādan, Sri Lanka. That was now it's there's Sri Lanka and there's India, right? But back then, Sri Lanka was an island off the coast of India, but they didn't call it India. At least the people who lived here didn't call it India. If you don't know about that, I don't know what I just pointed to, but they'll explain the origin of the term India and why that's not actually what this is called. But now people call it that here too, because the British came and made most people speak English, and less than half everyone, but still. Okay. It's come to be, I think that's the official name of the country, has the name India in it. But anyway. What? Oh yeah, Sri Lanka. A fun little thing I learned years ago is if you go on social media and you add yoga teachers from all around the world, Russia, Japan, India, the United States, Canada, South America, Antarctica, anywhere in the world, and then they accept your friend request or something, you say namaste. They'll say namaste back, but not if they're from Sri Lanka. They'll say, no, you've mistaken me for an Indian. I'm from Sri Lanka. Ayugobovan, something like that. It means like live long and prosper, but they don't say namaste. Everyone else in the world who practices yoga says namaste. The narcissism of small differences again. And as mentioned before, there was no difference really between Sri Lanka and the rest of India back then, except for, at times a king would conquer some amount of territory. So I say, oh, well, this isn't under that king, this is, under this other king, whatever. Islands are usually harder to conquer in the old days. All right. Okay, let's try to stick to the text, shall we, Edward? Ananda's late arrival. To judge from the way that Buddhaghosa speaks about them, the Banakas were still active in his day, but they seem not to exist today, at least not in Ceylon. It is likely that the growth of the practice of writing and the increasing use of MSS made it unnecessary to keep up the schools which were dedicated to the recitation of the complete Nikayas entrusted to their care. All right. The Pāli Vinaya Pitaka goes on to relate how, following a dispute over certain points of discipline 100 years after the death of the Buddha, a second council was held. So the first council was held, one assumes shortly after the Buddha passed away, so that they could say, okay, how are we going to move forward now that the source of our teachings isn't here? And then they had that whole thing, well, I remember him saying this. Does anyone else? Yeah, he did say that. And everybody said, okay, yeah, he definitely said that. And then they would all say it together so that they could remember it. And then when they would repeat it later, they would say, thus I have heard, and say it. So that's the beginning of what we can call Theravāda. Okay. In the presence of 700 bhikkhus. So in the first council there were 500, and in the second council 100 years later there were 700. Not exactly exponential growth, but growth nonetheless. Revata asked the Tera Sabakamin about the discipline. This council is described in the Vinaya as Vinaya Samgiti. The Dipavamsa calls it the Dhamma Sangaha, and it followed in this by the Mahavamsa. So yeah, when I first read this, I was just like, but I'm hoping, one of the things I'm hoping is that by reading it aloud and then hearing it, re-listening to it, that eventually some of these words will stick. And then, I'll gradually look them up and kind of figure out, okay, that's referring to this. And then once all the Pāli texts come, then we can, maybe like there'll be a whole book that dives into just one thing that's being mentioned here. This book just sort of like brushes through everything. So it's just like, to me, it just feels a little bit like putting a bunch of Sanskrit words on little pieces of paper in a hat, and then like pulling it out and throwing it on a piece of paper and putting English between them, and then just words, Sanskrit, words, Sanskrit. But I don't know. Something in here. Part of it is, as you may have noticed, like my own thoughts are always trying to push through, and like, I'm gonna think. No, don't take over the word processing part of my brain. I need that for talking and thinking and talking in my head. So it's it's a struggle. But I don't know. It seems like a little bit of a Buddhist struggle, right? If I can have the patience to calm, like they say, and there's some overlap, I think, in the philosophies of yoga and Buddha, and the Yogacara school of Yogacarya or Yogacara. I know those are two different things, but anyway, there was a school of Buddhism that I want to learn about eventually. It came much later. It's not Theravāda. It sort of came like as a development upon Mahayana, but it was like a merging of yogic philosophy and Buddhism. And it influenced the development of Tibetan Tantric Buddhism as well as Zen Buddhism, Chan Buddhism, which later became Zen Buddhism. But when you try to find like documents about Yogacarya or Yogacara itself, good luck. Comment below if you know of one in English that I don't. I try to avoid like books that were written within the past like 20 or 30 or 40 years, just cause I feel like I know those guys. I know what they smell like. I've hung out in the same cults as them, you know. So, like, what was it Dion Fortune said that I don't acknowledge any gurus that are still alive, you know, or something like that. I don't know. That's sort of an emotional thing, but there's a guy. When I wrote to the guy who I guess is running, or at least running the email correspondence for the temple that was founded by Osho, not Osho, but Osho, the one I pointed to earlier, the Japanese Osho. Back in Los Angeles, and I told him, hey, it's me. We corresponded briefly 5 years ago, and I asked about the YouTube channel that I couldn't find, and he sent me that link, which is how you have it now. And then he said, oh, we have a good friend who has a temple in New Delhi. And it's another one of these older Japanese guys who spent years studying in China at various Buddhist temples. He dove deeply into Theravāda. I think he was in Sri Lanka for a while. Then he was studying Tibetan Buddhism, and then now he runs an organization based in Dharamshala. It's a popular place to base your organization, whether you're based out of New Jersey and a total cult, or apparently Japanese Zen, or obviously the Dalai Lama. Yeah, I'm referencing something that Matthew Remsky from Conspirituality was talking about, his ex-cult that sort of traumatized him. Yeah. So anyway, what was I talking about? Yeah, no, that cult doesn't have a temple there, but they did like an event there, so it's a popular place to go have an event, and then like invite people and say, for only $6,000, you can reserve your spot at our special event next year, a week-long intensive where I make you lose sleep and talk your ear off and visualize weird things with Vajrayogini and that kind of thing. Anyway, so this Japanese guy is based in Dharamshala, has a temple in New Delhi, but I'm like, part of me is like, oh, that might be cool to visit, but I'm like, I don't know, unfamiliar spiritual guru types that I don't know, or that I don't know anybody who knows. I mean, okay, I know he's a friend he knew Osho, or knows Osho, that Osho, not that Osho. Not that Osho, not the one who wrote these books, but the other one. He only has 1,000 followers on YouTube. Well, anyway, he knew him, knows him, and has a similar background, but I still hesitate to like get in touch because I don't know. I just feel more comfortable trying to figure it out on my own, and part of that is I just don't want to get involved, And so when someone told me the other day, or recently, like, well, if you don't get into a lineage, and you don't have a guru, and you don't accept the empowerments, and you don't take the oath, then you can't even really call yourself Vajrayana. You're more like Sutrayana. So I felt like that was an insult. I felt like that was degrading. I felt like that was kind of a put down, and the sort of thing that a person in a cult would say. But I'm still friends with the guy, so if you're watching, sorry, I'm still processing what you said. But anyway, I don't think you're going to watch this. yeah, so, I'm just embracing that. Okay, I'm Sutrayana. I'm a Pratyeka Buddha, path. I'm not something with Buddha in the title, but Pratyeka poser, Sutrayana, intellectual yogi who's trying to get there with books. But it seems like the sort of convenient thing that an ignoramus, who just says, just look into my eyes and get the truth. Don't look at books, like... That was something I was told in 1993, 1994, was don't look at books. And I followed the directions because I was a dumb kid, So I'm very skeptical. And so I don't know. I don't think I'll actually get anywhere as far as enlightenment goes in this lifetime. Already kind of damaged goods as far as that goes. I'm not going to be able to come in like the starry-eyed young monk and say, shave my head and teach me Odoken, I'd be much more like... What do you mean by that, to the leader? So, yeah, I don't know. Then again, maybe it's better that way, right? Maybe I shouldn't be second-guessing what can also be thought of as a kind of wisdom. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call this, I'm just going to stick this here, and then we're going to jump in where we left off next time, and shift gears to where we left off in the Sasanavamsa. Now I'll try not to talk so much. Okay. The Mutika, or table of contents, at the opening chapter of the Sasanavamsa seem to promise a general history of Buddhism. Beginning from the birth of Buddhism, the author gives a brief summary of the orthodox Sinhalese tradition, drawn from a few well-known works. Did we read this already? Well, I'm going to go ahead and read it. The Anatakata, the Atakata of the Mahavir in Ceylon, the Samantapasadika commentary of Buddhaghosa, we know who that is now, on the Vinayapitaka, the Mahavamsa, and the Dipavamsa chronicles, historical and religious, of Ceylon. I'm just going to commit to saying Ceylon until I find out otherwise. Events are brought up to the time of the Third Council in the time of Ashoka, I think, is AC with a dot under it, Asoka Piyadishi, with a 3 next to it. Anyway, and the sending forth of missionaries from Patahaputra to, what is that word? This is the one that's the photocopied Pāli Sutra shoved into a Word document. So, sorry, let me just... 9 different countries by the Thera Mahagaliputta Tissa. The latter history of the later history of the region is then followed in the countries mentioned, a separate chapter being given to each. The whole of these 9 chapters fall, roughly speaking, into 2 books or parts, by which division the scope of the Sasanavamsa as a history of Buddhism becomes clear. Part 1, as we may call it, departing slightly from the order of the Matika, is a group of chapters of unequal length, mostly very short, and consisting of a few legends, strung together with quotations from Buddhaghosa and Vipavamsa, the accounts of Sihala and Suvanabhum, however, show far more care and completeness. I think we're almost to the time of the year where I'm going to have to turn on that air conditioner. Haven't even turned it on yet because it was cold. And then the heater stopped working, and it was kind of like still cold, but then it was like, okay, it's not so cold, we need the heater. But now I feel like I shouldn't be sweating this much on camera. What am I, Nixon, going up against Kennedy? Then that first, do you know about that? How many cards have I used? I'm not going to point to that. That's a ridiculous thing to point to. People say that Nixon lost to Kennedy because he had a sweaty upper lip. because it was the beginning of television. In fact, they kind of made reference to that in Back to the Future. That would have been, of course, before the election with Nixon and Kennedy. But Doc Brown figures out, based on seeing the handheld 1980s, home video camera, that if there's just cameras everywhere, then of course the president has to be an actor because you have to look good on television. So he figures that out in 1955 because he's a sharp one. Also because the script was written in 1983 or something, revised and so on. I think it was a furnace before it was a DeLorean. Anyway, where were we? The whole of these names, okay. Fall roughly speaking, we already read that. The accounts of, however, show far more care and completeness, or we should rather say more knowledge of the subject than the others of this group. Whatever I had just said. The accounts of Sihala and Suvarnabhumi. That of Sihala is drawn chiefly from the same sources as the opening chapter, with some additions from a work of Burmese origin, Buddha-Gosa Pati. Buddha-Gosa Pati. It's Buddha-Gosa plus Pati. Not Pati, Pati. Okay. For Suvarnabhumi, the author, it just reminds me of Bhumi from Avatar. Anyway, the author gives as his source the Atthakatha, the Rajavamsa, parentheses, probably the Pegu Chronicle, and lastly, the inscriptions dating from the 5th century of the celebrated Kalyani Sima, the remains of which still exist in a suburb of Pegu City. Where's Pegu City? Probably in Sri Lanka, I guess, right? All right. Part 2 is the longer and more important. It takes up about 3/5 of the book, the Sasanavamsa, the book that I have in my hand, that we can't read because it's not in English. There's no English translation. Why did it say that this was the English version of the Sasanavamsa when nobody's translating? Does anybody speak this? Does anybody watching this who speaks English as a second language that I can give money to translate the Sasanavamsa into English? Does anybody know about an actual English translation of Sasanavamsa? Why does it say Sasanavamsa on the front and claim to be English when it's not any of those things? Okay, sorry. Okay, so going back to talking about it by people who have read it but didn't bother to translate it for us. It takes up about 3/5 of the book, but consists solely of chapter 6. Okay. Which treats the history of religion in Aparanta, that is, in Mrama, on Burma proper. Before this chapter is examined, a few characteristic traits of part 1 should be pointed out. The resume, that's in italics with the accent aigu, that one. Anyway. The resume of the early history of Buddhism, including the 3 councils and the Great Schism, Great Schism, including the early history, the Great Schism. They had a Great Schism? Okay, all right, cool. No wonder Mahayana had to come along and say, okay, look, everybody, stop it with your schisms and your this lineage and that lineage. We're just going to have one big Buddhism. Lotus Sutra. Love it or leave it. I get it. I mean, it does kind of fit with that whole Joseph Smith analogy. But anyway. Okay. Where were we? So there was a Great Schism. That's news to me. When it's great with a capital G, it's like, you'd think I would have heard of it. But I haven't. There was the Great Schism in Christianity when Rome and Greece split. And with Rome, of course, went like France, England, Italy, obviously, Germany, Spain, Portugal, obviously. And then, Northern Europe, they later Yeah, well, anyway, they were less kind of connected. But anyway, then with Greece went Africa, the Middle East, Russia, China, like every other, the whole world except for like Western Europe went this way, and then Western Europe went that way. And what Western Europe had going was autocracy. They had a pope, and what he said was fucking the word of God. And then, the Greeks were voting and stuff, talking it out and saying, oh, I disagree. Oh, well, you can't say that because right here it says this. And so, of course, Rome took over the world. And now history is repeating itself with Russia. Anyway, while the U.S. shoots itself in the foot over and over, talking about it and debating and saying, oh, it says right here, oh, but you're a hypocrite. Oh, well, we're all hypocrites. I mean, if you judge them, then you have to remember what we did to the Native Americans. You can't judge Russia for taking over Ukraine. And they're done. Yeah, Ukraine's a colony of Russia now. So what were we talking about? Oh, we were shooting each other in the... Stupid. See, I'm from America, so I can talk shit, right? So can you. Everyone can talk shit and should. Anyway, let's finish a sentence and then we'll close. This is about Buddhism. Right? And we already know it's in the mission statement. We're going to get nowhere with this. We're going to take a long time and finally conclude that they're right. You can't get anywhere with books. No. I'm hoping that we'll get somewhere, or at least, I don't know. People have asked me why I'm doing this. I don't know. It's a process toward what? I don't know. I feel like I need to know this stuff, and I don't. So I'm trying to learn it, but I don't want a teacher. So you see my problem? Yeah. Okay, the resume of the early history of Buddhism, including the three councils and the Great Schism, followed by the rise of 17 sects in the 2nd century of religion, is 17 sects. Okay, I just added a little more sympathy for the author of the Lotus Sutra. As I have said, drawn from well-known Sinhalese sources, but a few chronicle details are added from Burmese history, or rather legend. At the time of the First Council, the Mahatera Kasyap is said to have established the new era. Okay, we'll close with that. Not the end of a paragraph. Okay, we'll finish the paragraph. Further, a certain Jambudipadaja is named as the king reigning at Tagaung, the ancient capital of Upper Burma, in the time of... Oh, that's not the end of a paragraph at all. That paragraph goes on for a long, long time. At the time of Ajatagutra, the friend of the Buddha. Okay, we're going to close there. And I'm glad I'm reading this, because I'm learning, details kind of surrounding that, what is it that I'm searching for? I don't know. I'd like to know what it was that everybody agreed on in the beginning. And then, I don't know, of course, everything makes me think of Life of Brian. How it's the shoe! No, it's the gourd! And how they're all dividing and killing each other, right after they've met Brian. If you haven't seen that, check out Life of Brian. I might have used too many cards. If so, then some of those times I pointed will lead nowhere. Okay, let's close. And don't forget to meditate. It's just friendly advice. I'm not giving commands or anything. I was going to say that at the beginning. I was going to say, turn this off and go meditate. Don't watch this. It's worthless. But not quite as worthless as everything else on YouTube. So, if you're stuck to YouTube, then by all means watch this. Okay. To the north and to the south, to the east and to the west, to the spirits of light among us, and to the spirits below, we send out our reverent love and compassion. May all beings be happy. May all beings be serene. May all beings be in peace. Thank you. you for going on this ride with me. And until next time.